Can you imagine spending an entire season believing you were the problem, only to discover that the car you were driving had a hidden structural defect? That was exactly what Charles Leclerc experienced in 2025. And the one who revealed the truth was none other than his new teammate, Lewis Hamilton. The 2025 Formula One season officially concluded in Abu Dhabi on a night full of fireworks, celebrations, interviews, and promises for the future. However, while most teams began to disconnect, relax, and think about 2026, at Ferrari the story was about to take an unexpected and brutal turn. The true end of his competitive year did not occur at the checkered flag of the last Grand Prix, but 2 days later, on December 9th, during the post-season test at Yas Marina. It was there that an internal storm was unleashed that no one in Maranello saw coming, except perhaps Lewis Hamilton. The official objective of that test was simple: to collect information for Pirelli about the new tire compounds for 2026. But for Ferrari, it was also a last opportunity to make adjustments, to experiment, to collect data with current drivers and tests that would serve as a reference to correct details for the development of the SF26. In theory, nothing critical was supposed to emerge from these limited batches. But exactly the opposite happened. During the day, the Italian team placed additional sensors, load recorders, and vibration measurement systems unusual even in an end-of-year test. What they didn't know was that they were about to witness a structural anomaly that had been hidden, latent, throughout the season. And it was thanks to the testimony and sensitivity of Lewis Hamilton that the best-kept and most dangerous secret of the SF25 was finally revealed. Lewis had insisted for months that the car was behaving erratically. On several radio stations, he was heard saying that something bends in the front and breaks in the back, a statement that sounded more like emotional frustration than a technical diagnosis. His words, although disturbing, were taken by the engineers with the typical caution of someone listening to an uncomfortable pilot. But in Abu Dhabi, telemetry proved him right. Absolutely and crudely. What was discovered was devastating. The SF25's monocoque suffered unexpected and abnormal flexing at the junction of the chassis and the front axle when the car faced prolonged high-intensity lateral loads. This flex, impossible to replicate in wind tunnels or the most advanced simulators, only manifested itself in real track conditions, and more specifically in high-speed corners with maximum downforce. This was not a simple tuning problem. It was a deep structural failure. The carbon of the monocoque gave minimally, but enough to alter the behavior of the car in real time. And the most serious thing, this deformation generated a chain of instabilities that affected the rear suspension, breaking the aerodynamic balance and turning the SF25 into an unpredictable, unstable, unsafe car. At times it seemed obedient on the straights, but became a threat in fast corners. This wasn't just a technical glitch, it was a silent scandal. The engineers, reviewing the data with Hamilton, were stunned. The car had been driven throughout the year by Leclerc and Hamilton without anyone detecting the true cause of the erratic behavior that both described. Ferrari didn't just build a car with a structural defect. It did so without having the ability to detect it with its internal tools. A total disconnection between simulation and reality, between theoretical design and track experience. That revelation in just a few hours of testing called into question the team's entire design philosophy. And it also set off alarms in the Maranello management leadership. Because what Hamilton discovered on that day of testing was not a simple technical curiosity. It was a time bomb that had been latent from the first lap of the season to the last. A bomb that Leclerc had been piloting without knowing it. What happened in Abu Dhabi, in that silent test in December, was more than a technical finding. It was the brutal exposure of an uncomfortable truth that Ferrari could no longer hide from its rivals, or from itself. When a Formula One car has a performance failure, it usually manifests itself in lap times, oversteer, understeer, or unexpected tire degradation. But what Ferrari experienced in 2025 does not fit any conventional pattern. The SF25 wasn't simply poorly designed, it was broken at its spine. And that hidden damage was bleeding the Scuderia project silently from within, race after race, until it was left morally and technically devastated. The abnormal bending detected in the monohull during the Abu Dhabi test was not a superficial micro-deformation. It was a failure in the structural integrity of the chassis, in the area where it joins the front axle, a critical part that supports extreme lateral forces in fast corners. When that connection gave way, even in millimeters imperceptible to the naked eye, the car lost the longitudinal rigidity necessary to maintain the stability of the aerodynamic flow under the floor. Because when Hamilton put the numbers on the table in Abu Dhabi, he left no room for doubt. The structure of the SF25 was not only inefficient, It was defective. And the entire season was built on a mistake that Ferrari had not even been able to suspect. For Charles Leclerc, the 2025 season was not simply frustrating on a sporting level. It was an experience that undermined his personal confidence, altered his relationship with the team, and raised doubts about his own ability as a driver. And the most devastating thing, all of this happened while he believed that he was the problem. For months, Leclerc lived with sensations that he could not understand or explain clearly. The car responded well in practice, behaved consistently in simulations, and in the engineer's data, everything seemed within normal parameters. But when the real moment arrived, in qualifying or in the first laps of a race, something changed. Suddenly, the SF25 was no longer a coherent single-seater. It braked where it shouldn't, it vibrated for no reason in the middle of a fast curve, it came off the asphalt at critical moments. It was like driving on ice without knowing when you were going to slip. That disconnect between what he felt and what the data showed led him to question himself. Because that's what elite drivers do. They blame themselves before they blame the car. Leclerc is a meticulous pilot, obsessed with detail, and that discipline became an emotional trap. He assumed each failure as his own. Every loss of control in a corner was a supposed lack of concentration. Each unexpected skid, a consequence of his aggressiveness behind the wheel. And every time he raised those questions with the technical team, he was met with bland, almost condescending explanations. They told him that the car had a very aggressive setup, that the changing track conditions had an influence, that the heat affected the compound, and that it should adapt faster. They never told him that the car could be failing at a structural level. Nobody ever thought that the real problem was in the skeleton of the car, and that institutional silence isolated him emotionally. In technical meetings, when he proposed adjustments, they listened to him with respect, but without conviction. As if his sensations had no technical support. As if everything came down to piloting. And in the end, when the results did not arrive, when the pole positions were slipping away and the podiums vanished due to inexplicable errors, Leclerc was exposed to external criticism. The press began to talk about a decline in performance, a decline in form. And he, unable to prove otherwise, began to believe it. The truth came too late. It was in that post-season test in Abu Dhabi, when the data from Hamilton's car showed in total starkness the magnitude of the structural failure. Leclerc was not wrong. It wasn't his aggressive style. They were not piloting errors. It was the car. The car he had defended all season was, in reality, a broken machine from the inside. And in that moment, everything fell into place. Every treacherous curve. Every sudden loss of grip. Every false brake. Every inexplicable vibration. Every time he had to get up earlier than necessary, it wasn't because of fear. It was for survival. The impact of that revelation was not simply technical. It was existential. Because it implied that he had risked his physical integrity race after race without knowing it. He had driven a car that, in extreme conditions, could collapse without warning. And he did it silently, without protest, trusting a team that, without knowing it, was exposing him. But the most painful thing was to see that this truth did not come from within Ferrari. It was not discovered by its engineers, nor by its simulations. It was exposed by Hamilton, the newcomer. The same pilot who for years was his rival. The same one who now, without intending to hurt, had revealed everything that Leclerc had been trying to explain for months without success. The emotional fracture with the Scuderia was sealed at that moment. Not with a scream. Not with a resignation. But with a silent understanding. Leclerc understood that he had been blindly loyal. That his trust in the team was superior to his instinct as a driver. And that led him to run an entire season with fear disguised as bravery. From that moment, something changed in his eyes. The Charles Leclerc who left Abu Dhabi was no longer the same. He was no longer the boy who dreamed of returning Ferrari to glory through loyalty and sacrifice. Now he was a man who had learned that even in Formula One, where every millimeter counts, sometimes the most dangerous thing is not a rival. It is the technical silence that conceals an uncomfortable truth. The revelation of the structural defect in the SF25 was not just a technical crisis. It was an institutional bomb that detonated silently in the heart of Maranello. All year, Ferrari had operated with a very clear internal narrative. The car was competitive but not perfect. The problems were part of the process, and the pilots had to adapt. That narrative fell apart in a matter of hours. What for months was interpreted as racing noise, as subjective sensations or driving errors, turned out to be the symptom of a design flaw that the team not only failed to foresee, but also did not want to accept when it was suggested. Internally, the blow was devastating. Because it wasn't a visible mistake like a slow pit stop or a wrong strategy. It was a systemic failure. A failure that overlooked all the validation systems, all the simulation tools, and most critically, all the layers of communication between the pilots and the technical team. The biggest disappointment wasn't that the SF25 failed. It was the team refusing to see that it was failing. Now, Leclerc finds himself at a personal crossroads. Are you still betting on a Scuderia that left you alone when you needed it most? Or are you starting to think that your best chance to be world champion is somewhere else? The pilot market is no longer what it was 5 years ago. The chairs are moving faster than ever. And Leclerc, with the talent he has, will have no shortage of suitors if he decides to step aside. Leave me your opinion in the comments what you think about all this.